Well, hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor. I'm your host, Tania Kolar. As we head into a brand new year, we're looking at ways to obviously optimize this year. Many people have bid a fond farewell to 2020 with all its challenges, including, the mental, emotional aspect, physical health as well. At any start to a new year, people are always looking for healthy ways to move forward. I know that's a resolution for so many of you. So what we're going to do for this show is talk about the link between the mind and leaky gut syndrome. It's so interesting how in today's world, so many people are really struggling and suffering with digestive concerns and issues and, all that gut stuff that's going on. So we're going to really dive deep into what's going on in the gut, what leaky gut syndrome is, and what you can do about it. Some really great tips coming up with my dear friend, Dr. Janine Bowring, who's joining us today. It is always such an absolute pleasure having you here, Janine, sharing your knowledge, helping people really live a better life, because our health is really everything, right? We need to have our health in order to live a quality of life that will really allow us to be the best version of ourselves.
Exactly. So great to be here. Honored that, I was asked to be on your program again. And yeah, this is a juicy subject when we're talking. And a lot of people don't realize the connections between the gut and the brain and how we're feeling. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. So, a naturopathic doctor that you are, I know that you've done so much research, not only with your own patients that you've worked with in the past, through your books, but also just through the research and putting together supplements and all kinds of things to really help with some of the issues that so many people are experiencing. So let's really dive into first, if we can talk about what is leaky gut syndrome. And so, because I think a lot of people probably have it and they don't really know what it is.
Yes, so great question. And we hear a lot about it if you read natural health blogs and things about what the leaky gut is. And it sort of gives, when I talk to my kids about, oh, it's leaky gut syndrome, to make connections with their own health or maybe a symptom that they're going through, they're like, ew, mom, that's so gross, because it's just a terrible visual, leaky gut, like your gut is leaking. No, well, yes, but no. So what it means is that there are tight junctions. So these are the connections in between the intestinal cells. And we'll do a little demo in just a second and I'll show you exactly what's going on. Mm-hmm. But those tight junctions in the small intestine can actually open up. And this is now where when we have poor digestion and undigested food, when we're in a stressed out state, those undigested food particles now and some of the unfavorable organisms, bacteria, parasites, and things can now pass through that open passageway because that tight junction has opened up. And now that is getting into the bloodstream. And as soon as something gets into the bloodstream, it's the immune system's job to say, hey, are you, friend or foe? Are you good or bad for me? And unfortunately, most times with the leaky gut syndrome, the immune system is going to sort of react and say, oh, you're an enemy. I don't recognize you. And this is where we can get into some more serious health consequences. And it started off in the gut, things like autoimmunity and, autoimmune disorders, whether it's arthritis, it could be lupus, there's a lot of evidence now that's pointing towards the gut. And this is sort of the outset of those autoimmune conditions, the thyroid as well. So whether it's low thyroid or overactive thyroid with Graves' disease or the Hashimoto's, which is the underfunctioning thyroid, and starting in the gut. So the good news is that medicine is looking at these connections and saying, hey, as much as we treat the thyroid gland because it's an autoimmune disorder, if we take a step back and from my perspective as a naturopathic doctor, from a preventative standpoint, by healing the gut and doing that first, then we never have to go down the road of developing these autoimmune disorders. So it really is food for thought for a lot of people. And I think there's a lot of hope. I mean, I think anything that gives us hope in these, crazy crazy times that we're going through in terms of reversing disease and getting healthy again and really paying attention to nature. And that's what I'm all about in my latest research around circadian rhythms and getting healthy, following the cycles of nature as our biology is supposed to do, that there really is hope in terms of getting well again and to heal even autoimmune disorders. There is that possibility of doing it. We just have to take the right steps to get there.
Well, we're going to help you with those right steps to learn what those right steps are today on the Mindset Mentor here on Sauga 960 AM. So stay tuned. We've got a great show coming up. And it's so interesting that, we certainly do have the power to heal ourselves, and the body's always giving us a signal like, hey, something is not right here. There's certain foods maybe that you are used to eating or you have been used to eating in the past that didn't affect you, and all of a sudden you start to eat those foods again and you don't feel good. So I think it's really important as well for us to start looking at and really analyzing the foods that we eat and the effect that it has on the body. Some foods are wonderful, and you feel that that great energy after you eat it, and it's good for you because it feels good. And the same thing is when something doesn't feel right, we know that maybe there's an option here for us, right, to maybe perhaps make better choices. But when it comes to leaky gut, I know that a lot of the foods that we eat are certainly a contributing factor to that. Now, if you have developed leaky gut syndrome, and so you start now to eat those healthier foods, are you still stuck in that cycle? Like, what happens now with the healthy foods that you start to eat? Does your body still try to fight that as well?
Well, yes. So the good news is that the gut actually repairs itself after 5 days. So, and starts to renew its cells. So that's the good news. So if you can, abstain from some of those foods and maybe the stresses in terms of stressing out your body and, staying away or finding tools, which we'll share today as to how to alleviate that stress, especially on the vagus nerve, which connects our brain to our digestive tract and our other organs. So, relieving that stress, coming away from the foods that can be causing some of that leaky gut syndrome and that opening up of those tight junctions, cleaning up the microbiome, which we know is really important. And for people who don't know what the microbiome is, that's, the healthy gut ecology in our guts. We have, thousands upon thousands of live microorganisms in our gut tissue. And we want to have a good diversity of those bugs, if we can call it that, in the gut. But we want always to have, more of the favorable microflora, the probiotics and the microflora that works on our behalf for our immunity, for our digestion, and less of the negative ones, the parasites and things. So, in order to start to switch this ecology around, take that pressure off of the digestive tract by eliminating some of those culprits, some of them being the polyunsaturated fatty acids. They're big. So things like corn oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, these are very pro-inflammatory for the gut and can really wreak havoc on those tight junctions in the gut. Something that we definitely want to avoid by switching over to some healthier oils like olive oil and coconut oil is very reparative for the gut. Then we can start to see these changes in the leaky gut syndrome and actually repairing the tissue. There are other specific nutrients that we can take, and I actually formulated a very specific protein powder to help to heal the leaky gut, having those accessory nutrients, things like selenium and acetylcysteine within that formulation to actually have that repair effect on the gut tissue. So you can actually see things turn around very quickly. And now, of course, you're not going to necessarily feel it in the gut. Yes, digestion in terms of gas, bloating, and if you do have the digestive complaints related to leaky gut, then you can see that improve very quickly. But more importantly, maybe some of the inflammation in your body starts to recede, and that, because of that connection, maybe you feel less stressed because now your serotonin, which is that hormone, most of our serotonin, which we know is the feel-good hormone, most of it is actually produced in our gut. And there's this whole connection that researchers have looked at between the vagus nerve, which again, is the wandering nerve. It's the big connector between the brain and the gut, and the gut and the brain. Actually, most of the vagus nerve's function is actually from the gut up to the brain, which is very interesting. And what the researchers have found is that they've done experimentation, if you are given a serotonin, so an antidepressant, to help with your serotonin levels, if they cut the vagus nerve, then, they've noticed that it's not going to have the same type of effect. So we need that combination of the vagus nerve working properly, as well as addressing the serotonin levels in the gut for, us to feel well. And that's super important. I think, especially these days with people suffering with depression and anxiety and everything that's happening, the fear factor of what's happening, the unknowns of what's happening in the world right now. It's so important to look at the gut and, to really focus in on what can you do today. Yes, there's a lot of, circumstantial things happening that we don't have a lot of control over, but what can you do for yourself right now in this moment to make yourself feel better? And, really focusing in on the gut health is, one of the tools that you can definitely focus in on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important. And so many people, are certainly struggling, and they think that, well, I'm just stuck in this pattern. But when you can make those small choices, simply changing, the foods that you eat can have such a massive impact on the overall, quality of your well-being, right? Your health, physical, emotional, mental, all of that combined really impacts your day. So let's talk a little bit about, again, some of the food choices, because, there's also the COVID-15, as they say, the extra 15 pounds that many people gain, right? So it could be a lot of the processed foods, which are certainly not, nourishing to the body, loaded with the chemicals, which I'm sure is a huge contributing factor to leaky gut syndrome. But so if we only do it for, let's say, a week, right? We eliminate those foods that we shouldn't have for a week, or we have one day where we have a cheat day on, let's say, day 4. Are we going to undo some of the work then that we're trying to get to with that day 5? Is it better to just completely abstain from all of those unhealthy foods, even though the temptation is there to want to have it?
That's a great question. I think on an individual basis, it really depends. If you have, really end stage rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of inflammation, then I'd probably say having that cheat day would not be in your best interest. And if your body has been used to having a lot of the culprits, so maybe it could be alcohol as well, so overdoing it. So we know that everything in moderation is okay for most people. It could be the wheat and the gluten, it could be the dairy products. And again, if you really want to be, proactive in terms of that healing phase, I'd say you have to be a little bit strict, probably for a couple months. As much as we know that the gut will heal in 5 days, but that repair, so you're taking the stress off of the system for that repairing to be happening and to sort of, put it stake in the ground and say, okay, I'm a healed gut now, then you can get away down the road, in my opinion, of having a bit of those, things that you love to have in the diet, a bit of alcohol. Coffee is another culprit, unfortunately, with the leaky gut. I know. Yeah. So, but a little bit's okay. But then putting it in combination with the stressors in your life and not having proper breathing techniques and things. So, it really is a combination. It is on an individual basis, but I think, to really do it well, a couple of months at the beginning, if you can be sort of hardcore and be a little bit clean with the diet and introduce the healing oils into the diet, like the coconut oil, which we discussed, but also taking, getting enough DHA, so the docosahexaenoic acid, which is typically from fish oils. Whether you're eating fatty fish, I prefer smaller fatty fish in the diet. The larger fish, the more toxins we have to deal with, and that's a problem with mercury and PCBs and things. But the smaller fish,
DHA through supplementation.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, for myself personally, that's how I prefer to get my DHA, because I know in a high quality fish oil supplement, I don't have to worry about mercury and PCBs and dioxins and all of those things. So, and I know that I'm just sort of covering up that base. I don't eat a lot of fish. To be honest, I'm just scared of the mercury. And, I heard a radio show report in terms of the sourcing of fish that we get here in North America. And it's very questionable, as it's not tested to be, to say, whereas supplements, a high quality supplement is absolutely tested to make sure that there aren't any contaminants. So that's my own personal opinion and what works for me. So everybody has to make those decisions for themselves. But, it is a factor that we have to consider, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be educated, right? Because things are always changing. And the foods from, decades ago, it's not the same today, with all of the chemicals that are used everywhere that is, picked up in farming and just, the earth and soil, all of that stuff. So it really is important to be educated and to kind of understand. So it's great that you have done the work for us to make it easy, because we all don't know, how to get the information or what the information means. So I love that you're able to break it down in simple terms for people so that they can really, take action to live their best life, to feel healthier. If you're waking up every day and you feel exhausted and you feel tired or bloated and just you don't feel good, it's really hard to have a good day. As much as you want to work on the mindset and say, all right, I'm going to be positive today, but when you physically feel awful, your mind and your body are in a battle. So I think it's really important to start to take those action steps. And even if you think, it's impossible, just try a little bit, because it's never impossible. And that's the thing, is that it's so interesting that the smallest change that you make has the greatest impact. If you continue to do something on a daily basis, time always adds up, right? So if we make a bad choice of eating a piece of cake every day, or we choose a healthy meal instead of that cake, in a few months time, or in a year time, which the year is going to pass anyways, or in 2 years, you're going to see a huge difference and improvement. So, I think it's always important to start small, take any action that you can. Also, that's great for the dopamine in the brain, right? That reward center. You want to reward yourself when you take that small action. So that small action could be, well, you know what, today I didn't have that chocolate bar that I really was craving, or that bag of chips, or the pizza, or the frozen dinner. You made yourself something that was healthy, and great. Congratulate yourself when you make those choices, because as you continue to congratulate yourself, it becomes easier, because again, the dopamine release, right? That pleasure, it helps you to stay motivated, but it also, will help you start to see the results. Because if you don't acknowledge those small successes and those wins, we often fall off the bandwagon and say, well, this is too hard, forget it. I didn't see any results, didn't feel any difference. So I think it is important to make sure that we give ourselves a pat on the back when we do make those better choices.
Oh, absolutely. And the better you feel, the more positive choices you make for yourself. It's just a win-win. And it's that first step. It's making that decision, to really help yourself. And I always talk about the baby steps. It doesn't have to be cutthroat at the beginning. It's too difficult. And depending on people's different personalities and their own personal life history and what they've experienced, that sometimes, jumping in with both feet is very difficult, and to go, cut things off cold turkey. But, slowly making those positive changes, as you said, really begets more feeling better. And it just, is that domino effect. So definitely taking those steps, trying to decrease some of those triggers that are, when we talk about sugar and, sugar addiction, and that releases dopamine in the brain as well. So it's that little trickery that happens, right? That can be very impactful in a negative way, because then you're always craving more and more and more. And so it really is important to be able to make those small changes. And I think when people understand and appreciate that, the leaky gut, they can't see it. So maybe we'll get into our demo so that you can sort of visualize for people that are seeing this, visually, but we'll explain it for you so that you can understand and appreciate. But, when we think of the small intestine, so what I have here on my table are...
I'm just gonna stop you there for just a moment because we're gonna take a break.
Okay,
so
perfect.
the break, we're gonna get into this incredible demonstration to really fully understand what leaky gut syndrome is and what you can do about it as well. So make sure you stay tuned and come right back here to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM with Dr. Janine Bowring as my guest today. Stay with us. Well, hello and welcome back to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar. Today's show, we are talking about the link between the mind and leaky gut syndrome. It's interesting that so many people are experiencing concerns and digestive issues, and we're going to talk about exactly what leaky gut syndrome is. Today, my special guest joining me is Dr. Janine Bowring. Always such a pleasure to have you on the show, Janine. So thanks for being here today. I would love to dive into your demonstration that you were just about to get into before we took a break, because I think it's so relevant to what's going on. You simplify things. That's what I love about the work that you do. You make it simple for us because there's so much information out there, and to absorb it all, it can take a long time. You've done the research, you've got the background, and so what is going on in the body with this leaky gut syndrome?
So again, just to reiterate, if people are just tuning in, the leaky gut is a syndrome in which the tight junctions open up in the small intestine and leaves for our undigested food particles, some parasites, some unfavorable organisms and bacteria to now pass into undigested into the bloodstream. And now the immune system sort of can react to those as foreign invaders because it's not properly broken down. And some of those bacteria and organisms simply shouldn't be where they are ending up now since they've passed through that intestinal brush border. And this is now how the leaky gut syndrome is so much related to autoimmune disorders and compromised immunity, which of course is top of mind for a lot of people. So really fixing the gut, fixing the microbiome is really important for overall health and prevention of disease, for longevity, and for, weight, keeping our weight where we want it to be. And certainly a lot of people can relate, I think, with the, after COVID and staying home and changes in diets and things. So really important. So what I can demonstrate here, so what I have on the table are 3 representations of that intestinal brush border. So it looks like grass coming out of these little pots, and that's the small intestinal cells. And we can see right now they're nice and close together. So that would mean health. That means proper diet, proper signaling of the vagus nerve. We are not stressed out. We're not depressed. Everything is working well.
There's always that communication, right, between the gut and the mind, and the whole body, the whole nervous system.
Exactly. So super, super important. And ideally, when we are in that relaxed state, so the parasympathetic part of our nervous system, our food has been broken down for us by our digestive enzymes, which we've secreted, which I'm holding up a ball now on top of my intestinal brush border. And that's a good thing. So now these intestinal cells will be able to do what they need to do with that digested food. And that's how we get that proper absorption because it's broken down. Now, what happens in times of stress, when we're stressed out and we won't secrete our digestive enzymes. Now, let's say we're adding into the diet the alcohol, the sugar, the coffee, the dairy, the polyunsaturated fats, so the vegetable oils, those baked goods that we pick up, that are easy easy carbohydrates, our comfort foods with all margarine and all of those, unhealthy fats. What happens now is that those tight junctions open up in the gut. So now what I'm doing is I'm separating out one of my little pots on the table. And we can see that that tight junction has opened up. So now I have a gaping hole in the tight junction. Usually the tight junctions are about 1 to 7 microns. So this is, I mean, this is really magnified what I'm showing you.
Yeah.
It should be about 1 to 7 microns. But now with the leaky gut syndrome, they can be 2 to 300 microns in terms of the space in between those gut cells.
So it's
Now
the
what
difference
happens?
in the gap. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So now what happens is that, yes, hopefully our food is, broken down and digested, but the worst case scenario is that this is now a big chunk of undigested, unbroken down food. So my ball now can pass right through that hole into the next space. And more importantly, if it's the bad bug, so now I'm holding up a little critter. So this could be a parasite, a bad bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
and this is part of that dysbiosis, right? So that unhealthy microbiome, now these bad bugs will also pass through, and this becomes a problem in terms of our immune system.
Obviously getting into the bloodstream, right?
Right.
Causing, some of that sluggishness and all kinds of stuff going on. But so that's, the bad bacteria, obviously. What about the good bacteria? Does that make a difference there as well?
It does. So having that healthy microbiome, making sure that you have enough of the probiotics, so the good friendly microflora, really helps to maintain the tight junctions. So putting my gut back together again, maintaining those tight junctions. But up here is helping to maintain this healthy microflora and ensuring the proper digestion, because the good bacteria, our probiotics, actually start to do some of that digestive process as well. And those good bacteria also make sure that we're extracting those nutrients that we need, like vitamin B12 is a big one, vitamin K, a lot of the B vitamins. They
Mm-hmm.
need to have enough of those probiotics to ensure that we're actually getting the nutrients from our food. So when we're lacking in probiotics, let's say we take an antibiotic. So a conventional antibiotic is going to wipe away that good flora. Now you're sort of setting yourself up for the leaky gut syndrome. So
Mm.
for anybody who's taken, chronically, even other drugs will do this. And the one that's, it's not funny, but it's sort of ironic, the proton pump inhibitors. So you've got acid reflux, you're taking a PPI, it's called proton pump inhibitor.
Like
It's
H. pylori as well. Like they use the same drug for that.
That's a little, yeah. And antibiotics for H. pylori, again, it's kind of ironic because they're supposed to heal, your gut symptoms. So whether it's
Mhm.
acid reflux or your ulcer that you've developed because of the H. pylori, but unfortunately it causes that leaky gut syndrome. So it actually causes those, and it compromises those tight junctions in the gut. So again, getting at the root cause as to why, maybe digestively you've got some issues. And as a naturopath, that's always the aim, is to get it to the root cause. Maybe it was stress that set this off for you in the first place and caused the opening up of the tight junctions. That's what you have to address on the mind-body connection and alleviating that stress. And I think it's easy to talk about relieving stress, but it's more difficult to actually implement things in your daily life to
Especially when
actually have.
you're part of the chaos in your life and the
Yes.
stressors, right? The depths, the despair, even like it's tough to start thinking about that or to feel a different way, because obviously our feeling is also a precursor to the end result, right? As you were talking, I was just thinking about people who possibly, and I don't know if this is even a thing, I mean, could they potentially have a genetic predisposition to leaky gut syndrome, or is it simply based on our food choices and our environment?
Well, it's a great question. And what the literature shows, that unfortunately when babies are born, so by C-section, I don't know if you've heard this before, but if a baby has not gone through the vaginal tract with a normal delivery, then you're already setting yourself up, the baby, for having digestive issues and allergies and inflammation, because they didn't get that initial inoculation of the microflora from their mom.
Mhm.
So that would be, a great example of right from the get-go. And then you see these babies at 2, 3 months of age, and they have eczema and terrible skin conditions, and maybe, different inflammatory processes already happening at that stage of life. And that's why in some countries and some practitioners and midwives and things, they'll actually, if it is a C-section baby, they'll actually inoculate with the mother's vaginal flora, and they'll rub it all over the baby, you know, as soon as they can, to ensure that that proper microflora is inoculating the baby's digestive tract and their other microbiomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating what the human body is capable of creating. So there is a natural process, just like in nature. If we look at the perfection of nature, you know, there is a system that's working behind the scenes that we really don't have to do much about. But you know, it is you know, a great opportunity to really start to look at things in our own lives that are no longer, you know, helpful to us, and that are kind of, you know, putting us on a downward spiral when it comes to our health. And that's really interesting, you know, about the babies and that. So just to go back to that for a moment. So in a situation where you know, the birth was a C-section, and that nobody did do the next step of bringing in that, you know, the mother's flora, or whatever you want to call that. So can you repair that for the baby quickly?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes, of course. So that would, you know, need a protocol with probiotics, depending on, you know, when it's discovered that that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And certainly if you're seeing a practitioner, a naturopath who's aware of these things, then absolutely that would be corrected. But a lot of people just don't know. And not everybody sees a naturopath. So that's why it's always my mission, as much information as I can share, to help babies, help moms, help, you know, in terms of getting at the root cause as to why down the road, it could be 50 years down the road that, you know, that was never set up in your system. And now you have the inflammation or the autoimmune disorder that, you know, repair can happen. That's the beautiful thing about our bodies. When we get in touch with nature, we connect with the earth, the electromagnetism of the earth. I'm all about the grounding. That could be another show. And, you know, looking and getting out in the sun is really important, especially first thing in the morning, to set up our circadian rhythms.
Yep.
But doing deep breathe in the eyes, exactly. And deep breathing is really important as well. So in terms of leaky gut, maybe we can do a quick exercise really quickly.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful.
If we have time. Okay. Yeah. So a quick breathing.
You know, can breathe, right? So
yes.
You don't want to go to the gym and work out and make all of these, you know, huge changes, but we're breathing anyway, right? So why not just take a moment, right?
Exactly. So this is specifically what researchers found in terms of the vagus nerve. And again, the vagus nerve is it's the biggest cranial nerve, the 10th cranial nerve. It goes from the brain down and touches probably all of the internal organs, but is very much connected to our digestive tract. So that gut-brain connection. And if you're having difficulties with leaky gut or autoimmunity, inflammation in your body, then by doing this breathing exercise, so basically you're going to breathe in for 2 seconds, you're going to hold it for 2 seconds, and then you're going to exhale, focusing on the exhale for 4 seconds or longer, depending on how, you know, experienced you are with your breathing exercises. But the longer exhale is what researchers have found. During the exhale, you're stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system. And again, that's the more relaxed state of the nervous system. This helps with the secretion of your digestive enzymes to break down your food. But what it does, and they found, and this is done on research on frogs, is that it actually causes the vagus nerve to squirt out acetylcholine, which helps to relax and slow down the heart. So it squirts this out onto the heart during the exhale, and by slowing down your heartbeat. Anybody who knows that when you get anxious, your heartbeat starts to, you know, really go crazy and increases in its beating. So by doing this, focusing on the exhale, we're helping to stimulate that vagal, you know, relaxation of the heart muscle itself, which is remarkable. So anybody who's going through a panic attack, you know, on your day-to-day life, if you're stressed out, you really want to help the leaky gut, then we can do this breathing exercise.
That's awesome, because I think that's something that everyone can do at any time, right? So if you do
Yeah.
find yourself, in a state of overwhelm, just relax, try to take a few breaths. You don't even need to sit there for 10 minutes. Just take a few breaths, right? To release some of that stress, let that tension fall away so that the body can do the natural process. The good news is that we don't have to, instruct the organs to do what they're doing. They do that automatically, but we can prohibit those organs from doing what they're supposed to do because of the stress or maybe some of the foods that we're eating. But I think it's so important to know that we have the ability to do, what we can quite easily. It's not a huge effort, essentially, to work on just those little things like the breathing, the breath. I think that's so important. I mean, you might want to also schedule it in. I always believe it's important to schedule things, right, as a daily habit if it's something that's going to benefit you. Schedule it in the morning, make that commitment. After you brush your teeth, take a few deep breaths, right? As you're standing there waiting for your coffee in the morning or that cup of tea, do some breathing techniques. And you're going to be amazed at the difference that you're going to start to see. And then you can spend a little bit more time. How many minutes would you suggest, that we do the breathing techniques? Or is it even minutes? How do you incorporate that?
Yeah, even if it's just a couple minutes, if you just have to kind of take a chill pill and just when I think most people know when they're a little bit out of sorts and their nervous system is not working on their behalf.
Yeah.
So certainly and much longer if you need to, like 15, 20 minutes if you can dedicate that time for yourself, depending on your condition and your level of inflammation or autoimmune disorder, that you really, help to just really calm down your nervous system, especially if you've got the digestive issues, the gas, the bloating, and just poor digestion in general. This can really go a long way at helping the leaky gut and all of those symptoms.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you for that great tip. And there's more great tips coming up here on the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. I'm Tania Kolar, and my special guest today is the fabulous Dr. Janine Bowring. She is a naturopathic doctor and helping us out today, understanding the connection between the mind and the gut. And we are talking specifically about leaky gut syndrome. So more on that when we come back, because again, we are all about helping you live and cultivate a life that you absolutely love. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, and today's special guest is my good friend, Dr. Janine Bowring. It is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here. I know this was a last minute, schedule, and you're super busy mom, busy woman, always working on new formulations, for your supplements and also just researching. So I do thank you for being with us here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love, talking anything health related. And, it's very important to me as a person, as much as I'm, busy doing lots of things to always educate. And I think the more we know and we empower ourselves with good information that's research backed but based on experience as well. I mean, anything that I talk about is something that I've experienced for myself, and I'm sort of my own best guinea pig, because it's one thing for the research to say, this, that, and the other thing is good. But when you put it into practicality, into, in my own life of being a very busy person and mom, like you said, if it's not something that I can practically do for myself, I'm not going to talk about it or say that this is a great way to go, because it's simply, not always. A lot of these body hacks and things that I see and I read about, and the research is there, but if it's simply not practical or, crazy expensive, it's not something I'm going to talk a lot about, because it's not for everyone, right? So I try to appeal to most people that are watching or listening that, these are the things that you can do easily and implement in your life to really have an impactful change.
Well, I love your mission and your purpose, and that you are, including everyone, trying to include as many people as possible in that, because we all deserve that great health. Without health, it's tough, right? It's your life is completely different, and we want to do what we can to live our best lives. We're meant to live an extraordinary life. The problem is that so many people, they resign themselves to the fact that, well, I just don't feel good. I haven't felt good maybe for years. And you think that's normal and that's just life. That's part of aging, but really it's not. There's so many things that are contributing, from to our health, and that could be environmental stressors, internal stressors, our mind, our thoughts, our habits, our patterns. All of that is connected. And I think it's so fascinating that we do have the ability to make a massive shift, and do that naturally as well for ourselves. Right. And that's the key. There's so many people as well who are taking medications. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's wonderful. Some medications are absolutely essential and you need that. But I think that, some of like the impetus is just, well, I'm going to take this because I don't want to even think about it. So somebody said, take this, I'm going to take it. And they don't understand it. They don't really know what's going on. But that's why I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's going to the root. It's understanding what's happening in the body and what can we do first from a natural perspective, to help ourselves. And I think that's so key and so important for everyone. So let's get back to the leaky gut syndrome. Again, so many people do suffer from that these days, and a lot of it is caused by the foods that we're eating and the ingesting, and also beverages, right? Some alcoholic beverages, not necessarily ideal for the gut. But so let's talk a little bit about some of the foods that we can eat to naturally start to heal that inflammation and the gaps in the intestinal wall, so to speak, right? And maybe some of the foods that we should be avoiding as well.
Yes. So one of the best things is to incorporate healthy oils into your diet. So olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. You have to be a little bit careful of the seed oils or the polyunsaturated fatty acids. So things like canola oil, probably my least favorite. Most times canola oil is genetically modified. So already that's a problem because our cells don't know how to recognize that, can cause a lot of inflammation.
Yeah. My mother used to cook with canola oil all the time. And so it was just a thing back then, right? You just think, well, okay. But you don't realize that, if I just used a different oil, I'd have a different situation right now.
Exactly. And the further we get away from nature, and this is always my mission, is to make people think about this. The further we get away from nature, how things naturally are grown and naturally occurring, the more difficulty our natural bodies have with living in that environment. So the environment is very important. So whether it is, an unadulterated oil that is healthy. Don't get me wrong. Seed oils can be healthy, but you have to ensure that it's organic and it's cold pressed and, it's coming directly from the fields and, has the less that's done to it, the better it is for our body, because our body will recognize it as the food that it is. Mm-hmm. When it's adulterated, genetically altered, then we run into difficulties. And that means inflammation in the body. And that's not something, that we of course want. And here's the thing. It's not like when you eat a poison, you're going to know pretty quickly. But when you're slowly having these things, the vegetable oils, the margarine, all those things in the diet daily, it's not going to be like, you're going to notice right away. It's not going to be like that sledgehammer that kind of says, okay, you did something wrong. That's not how it happens. And that's why so many people are walking around with inflammation and autoimmune disorders and thyroid problems and headaches and digestive gas and bloating and weight gain. It's because they're doing these little things every day that they don't know are contributing to that, unhealthy environment, whether it's internally or externally. So in terms of our environment externally, we're completely disconnected from the earth. So we wear, when we talk about grounding, and I actually interviewed one of the authors of the book Earthing. I don't know if you've heard about that, Tania, but yeah. So Dr. Sinatra, has done a lot of research on grounding. And what grounding is getting, connected with the earth. So walking barefoot outside, even in winter, in Canada. Important, you can wear wool socks or thin cotton socks even on the snow, but we have to connect to the earth. We walk around most times
Even
with
just touching trees, I think is a good thing. I mean, I understand the grounding concept, and I think that's awesome. And in the summer, I have done it. In the winter, I was not out there, I'm going to be honest, but I did take my gloves off and touch some trees.
okay.
Does that work?
So touching the trees, not as much as what you would think. So if you touch the green stem of a plant, yes, you'll be grounded. If you touch the bark of a tree, if you're not touching the sap of the tree, so if it's just the outside bark, it's not grounding.
Oh,
You have to, you have to connect to the root system and the water, because the water, of course, is conductive. And that's why the snow is good. That's why getting in the ocean is the best, connection in terms of being a natural Faraday cage to help to protect us. Because where I was going with this, being disconnected from the earth, wearing, the rubber-soled shoes, we're not connected. We walk around disconnected. Now, the fact, because of our modern world, we're inundated with all the EMFs, so all the electromagnetic, right? All the radiation, the EMFs and the EMR from our cell phones, from our, devices, our television screens, our iPads, and all of those things, that we, especially now, and 5G, if you live in an area where 5G is, now we're completely inundated with this it's called non-native EMFs. So not the natural EMFs that we have from the earth and the magnetism of the earth and the sun and the moon. Now we have all of this artificial EMFs, and that is very compromising to our tight junctions in our gut, believe it or not. So again, connecting to earth, getting barefoot, getting outside, seeing that early morning sunrise, super important to wake up our brain and our vagus nerve, that whole connection. Our body basically lights up when we see the sun in the morning. Even on an overcast day, it doesn't matter, but getting that sunlight in our eyes first thing in the morning is probably one of the most important things that we need to do for our health. And then you'll start to see things change. I mean, this is something I've experienced for myself. I'm a pretty healthy girl, right? You know me, and I'm pretty healthy.
You follow the rules, you're consistent, which is amazing, right?
And I try to be, and my diet is good, my supplementation is good, and yet I still had missing links. And that's what really drove me to really study about the earth and nature and circadian rhythms and connecting with the ground and the grounding and the earthing, but also that early morning sun. It's a game changer. This affects all of your hormones. It affects your body composition. So if you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, I mean, it's completely connected to everything. So that's another tip for everyone.
Do for yourself if you are struggling with insomnia, if you're having difficulty sleeping, just making that one change, getting the sunlight into the eyes in the morning is going to have a huge impact on your sleep system as well.
Absolutely. And the reason, which a lot of people don't realize, is that because your melatonin is actually offset by that sunlight coming in your eyes first thing in the morning. There's something called melanopsin in our eyes. And that melanopsin is that, signaling to the brain and our pineal gland later in the day for that melatonin secretion. So really, really important. If you're not getting that early morning light in your eyes, naturally occurring, so without sunglasses is really important. You've got to look at the sun or in the direction of where the sun is, even if it's behind the clouds. Yeah. And that then sets you up for good sleep later at night. And people would think, that's completely unrelated, but it is. I mean, and that's what the physiology and what the research shows us.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too, because in terms of neuroplasticity, that's the brain being able to learn, right, and to adapt and to grow, always learning new things. That process, even if it's like you're learning something and you're working on the brain, it doesn't actually take place until the evening as you're sleeping. Right. So yes. That as well is so important. It's extraordinary, the connection between the mind, the body, the gut, all of that. And, we do have it within our capacity to really start taking control. And I encourage people, especially right now when they are in high states of stress, feeling overwhelmed. I mean, so many people obviously right now are working at home. They're trying to find the balance of working at home, having all the kids at home, their partners at home. And if they're not used to that environment, that's a big change, and it can cause a lot of stress. Everybody's trying to work, the kids are trying to do their schooling. It can be a full household, or it could be that there is only one person in that household, or, a couple of people. And they might find isolation is a concern, which is causing stress, or there's just too much activity going on. So I love your idea as well about taking the time to do some deep breathing that can calm those situations. And also, again, just to get that full breath in, because the shallow breath, causes either that fight or flight system in the body to kick in. And before we wrap up the show, Dr. Janine, is there any other tips that you can give us to help us, really try to live our best life, through the smaller changes that we can make, and not so overwhelming, because so many people right now are tapped out with the overwhelm, right?
Yeah. Well, one big suggestion is to turn off the negativity. So if you have the ability to turn off, whether it's social media, negativity posts, don't look at it, turn it off. If it's the news, turn it off. Just decrease that impact of that negativity and the fear around you. And that goes a long way at really, letting you connect with nature again. If we think back 500 years, we didn't have television sets. What did we have as our stimulus on the outside of ourselves? It wasn't, what was on a screen. It was tuning in, listening to the birds, or seeing the snowfall and watching it fall, or hearing the wind in the trees. That was the stimulus that we had. It's the laughter of our children around us. And, speaking to our loved ones and enjoying a meal together. I mean, that goes a long way for good digestion and healing the gut, is to have those positive, that positive energy around you and being connected to the earth and all the goodness we have around us. So that, that would be probably my biggest tip, is to really watch what your, stimulus is around yourself, the inputs, as I call them, what your inputs are around you. And we do have some, as much as it's all out there, we do have the control to be able to turn some of it off, especially if it's negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. We definitely want to set ourselves up for success in those situations, right? Take a pause, do what we can, so that we can avoid some of the destructive patterns that happen after the fact, right? So that's wonderful. And unfortunately, we are out of time. I wish we had more time to chat. It's always so great having you on the show. And I want to thank you so much for being here, sharing your wealth of knowledge, and helping to really break it down, keep it simple. And so thanks again. Always great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
All right, everyone. So that's a wrap for today's The Mindset Mentor Show here on Sauga 960 AM. Make sure you tune in next Saturday at 11 a.m. And remember to cultivate and condition and strengthen your mindset. Your mindset is like a muscle that needs to be nourished and strengthened. So let's take control and do what we can to live our best lives, because we deserve it. Stay with us. We'll be back.